Hey there, I'm Tam,
And I'm eternally mortal.
and this is the Hidden Egg podcast where we talk about vulnerability.
Thanks and welcome back.
So, before I get started, I want everybody to know that I've been putting the notes, the things that we look at for doing the podcast, they are out on my Patreon page and on the Buy Me a Coffee page. Both of them you can access pretty much if you like sponsor us at all. There's, I think, a $1 membership thing for either one of them. If you wanted to get them like month after month, it's $1 for the whole month. And yeah, that's
And then you get access to the notes that we reference.
yeah, and you can
every
follow
week.
along. So watching on the sheet where we're at, and
Yeah, because the notes are released early, it seems.
yeah, I released them. At least I'm hoping to try to do 24 hours in advance. We'll see if that continues.
Mm.
Um, Oh, yeah, and in my notes, I wanted to apologize to everybody, Mortal especially, because my notes have kind of strayed from the original concept a bit. And I noticed last time and the time before last, we kind of had a lot of like note reading to do, and that wasn't quite what we intended to make the podcast about.
Yeah, but it does help, our awkward brains with like, we have a thing that we can then look at and decide to talk about that in case we can't pick from the infinity to pick to talk about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
So,
that's
like, I
true.
appreciate your notes. I also appreciate your apology and you're forgiven.
It's just, it wasn't
I
as
love you.
vulnerable in those sense because it's not very vulnerable to read off some stuff. So,
Sure, sure.
anyway, so from there, we're going to move on to the responses. And we have a few this week. We got Grace Bianco. Love how involved I am in the medium community. I don't know if that goes towards me and Mortal or if it's
I'm
just me.
super not involved. But thanks, Grace. We appreciate your comment. But
You're
no,
getting
I'm
more
I'm
involved.
getting slightly more involved. I actually had a little bit of a cute comment train for a couple people's articles in the past couple of days. But we'll see if that continues.
Jenny Lane liked where I put "I appreciate you" in my article last week for the podcast and said that she appreciates me.
Thanks, Jenny. That's cute.
Sierra and Lane really enjoyed the anger episode we did.
Yep, thank you, Sierran. It was a great topic to talk about. I just recently re-listened to it, and I'm pretty happy with it. So thanks for the suggestion. We very much appreciate it.
Keen Moses is happy about what we're doing here on Medium.
And thank you, Akeen.
Jan Sebastian saying that we're kicking some serious medium butt.
Thanks, Jen. That's very cute. We appreciate that. Again, highlighting your tagline. I love that too.
You good? It was very, very
Oh
happy
yeah, I
about.
did say scratching the very butthole of an hour.
Yeah,
Yeah, I did. Uh huh.
she was
Mm-hmm.
dying laughing over there.
I'm glad you liked it. You good? That's awesome.
And was very happy that we listened to the narration and put that in the shout outs and everything. So yeah. Oh, she also mentioned that she's interested in learning about the biochemistry of like anxiety and stuff. I don't know how much we'll go into that. Like, we're not professionals at that, but we might put that for a future episode, maybe, if that sounds
We'll,
interesting.
we'll see if either one of us have the gumption to research that to talk about it accurately.
Right. Sierra again with one of his epic comments.
Yeah.
it, it was, he kind of went into depth about the things that we talked about with the conflict resolution versus conflict management and different conflicts that he found himself in that related. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's really long and it's epic and pog, so I strongly suggest that you check that out. I may put a link to the comment in wherever I can for the video, but if I forget, it's on last week's excuse me, it's on last week's Medium article for the podcast.
And thanks for the discussion, Sierra. And it was good, some good points in there. I liked it.
And then there was Eric Monk, which he hadn't started listening to them yet, and finally started listening to it. I'm super happy about that.
Welcome to the party, Eric. It's good to have you.
And there was, oh, what did he say? Oh, this is the one that I just read.
Well, most importantly, he's decided to stick with Mort, and I appreciate the gumption, Eric. Um, I still prefer Mortal, but I appreciate the gumption anyway.
Yeah, but it's still funny to hear people call you Mort.
Mort, yeah.
Bring in Mort back
Mort,
as a
Mort.
name. Um, he suggested that we cover the idea of voluntary versus involuntary vulnerability.
Right, which I kind of also take as kind of like consensual and non-consensual vulnerability because I think
Yeah.
they kind of go hand in hand. And I agree that it's an interesting idea for an episode. So I think
I
that
don't
will get added to our list.
I don't think I'd ever really heard of that, the voluntary versus involuntary, and that seems really interesting. So yeah, I've got that on the list.
Hell
And
yeah.
my favorite comment so far is this one little blurb that Eric Monk put. It's hard to connect with a Teflon shell.
Mm, mm, mm.
I just like the imagery of like trying to build a rapport with a Teflon shell.
I don't know. I think I could do it. But I really liked the Danish expression "rest in yourself." I think I understand what that means, and I agree that, or I think that we should have a similar expression because I think it's a cool one.
We have, and help me if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Akanksha, I believe is her name,
That's how I would guess too.
and she says she started listening to this podcast too and enjoys the vibes of dopamine that we're providing.
Oh, thank you very much. We appreciate you being here.
And last but not least at all, Ben Ulancy said I'm pronouncing his name right.
Uh huh. You did it.
You stop.
You did
You
it.
stop making me
You're
doubt
awesome.
myself.
You did a fantastic job. Good job.
And he's still, he's being understanding about whether or not we want to do guests. And I do think that eventually we do want to do guests, but we're shy and we're slow. We're slow at doing things.
We've said that. Yeah, it's cool though. It'll come around, and we'll definitely start talking about it if it becomes closer.
So I do want to get around to it though at some point in the near future. Just what near is maybe a little bit subjective.
Mm-mm-mm. Agreed.
Okay, that was the responses. I think there was probably other things that were said, and I must have missed some stuff, but
We'll do our best.
I'm only human, man.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, this week's topic, I believe, if I remember correctly, is relationships, right? Vulnerability
Yes.
as it exists within and around relationships.
Yes, and Lorna had like a whole like broad scope of different things as suggestions because oh my god, she has so many great ideas, but we couldn't get around to them all, and relationships seemed like
Let's at least our first dip
yeah.
into the suggestion. And thanks for the suggestion, Lorna. Since it is complex, we'll probably get into other aspects of it as we go along.
And I did in the notes, I did actually find places where we can touch on some of the other stuff that she suggested too. So it'll be a nice introductory thing for other sessions to come.
Mm.
Okay, so the first thing I put down is that like when you think about relationship vulnerability, the first thing that's going to pop into your head is romantic.
For a vast majority of people, I think that that's correct. Yeah, romantic relationships are kind of what we think of when we think of relationships. There's a few of us out there that are, a lot more hyper fixated on friend relationships, but but yeah, I think that a lot of vulnerability comes out, especially when you're like starting to like dip into romantic relationships as like a teen or whenever you start doing that sort of thing. So
Well, I think in this respect, vulnerability gets confused with intimacy. And being intimate is absolutely being vulnerable, and being vulnerable does build intimacy, but it doesn't always.
it doesn't
Sometimes you're
have to.
vulnerable and it doesn't build intimacy. It's not it's not necessarily something that has to happen from it. It's something that could happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's probably why we start thinking about romantic relationships when we just think about relationships in general, because it's the most widely acceptable place to be intimate with a person.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as acceptable to be intimate with your best friend because you
Sadly.
could be gay, man. which is stupid because like what's wrong with being gay first and foremost, and second off, why is being, intimate with your friend suddenly something sexual? Why are you sexualizing the fact that we enjoy each other's company and can trust each other and know each other on a deep intimate level? Why
Yeah.
does that have to do with sex?
Well, there's a lot. I don't know. I mean, I could go into the puritanical origins of the country. Is that the right word? I don't think that's the right word. The
It sounds right.
Is it right? Maybe. But anyway, the
Sorry,
sex
I'm
became.
opening a Skittles bag.
I mean, you eat your Skittles, although they probably won't be able to hear me a little bit during that. But that's okay. That's not really. I love this. This is fantastic.
There we go. It's
Uh,
instant little energy pills, basically.
somehow, somehow this country decided to demonize sex, and there's many other countries out there that also demonize sex. Some of them way worse than us. Um, and because of the demonification of it, I think that it became a lot more appealing to especially people that are in kind of a rebellious mindset. And I think a rebellious mindset happens to all of us. And so we hyper fixated upon it because we were told it was naughty. And there's a lot of us out there that kind of like naughty, kind of. But at the same time, there should be some. I don't know. It'd be nice if not everything was sexualized.
It
Because
sounds
like
like it sounds like
I
you're
want to be able
really
to.
just saying that because our culture makes it bad for you to talk about it, they've kind of like pushed it into this little tiny space you're allowed to do it in, then we just see it everywhere.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that do. I know I did, like, for the few years after puberty, I was very hypersexualized. I kind of look back on it with shame, if I'm
Hmm.
being honest. But yeah, it'd be nice if these things were a lot less sexualized. I know of a story of a moderately popular creator where he was very intimate with his bros, um, physically, in certain ways, and it was never like actually sexual. It was just for funsies, and I think everyone had a positive experience with it, and so it can happen. And I'm a polypan person, so like you be as intimate as you are willing to with your bros, in my opinion, bros and sisters and non-binary
I mean, I
friends.
think it's fine when everybody's having a good time. It's just when people decide that they need to throw out that's gay, like for one, like gay being gay is a bad thing, and for two, that familiarity, that closeness has anything to do with their sexuality. Like, come on, man. We can be vulnerable and it not have anything to do with our sexuality.
That's true. I agree. I can agree with that. And I work with those assholes that say that things are gay as a derogatory thing, and I laugh at them most of the time.
When I looked it up, trying to find different things to talk about and think about on the podcast, one of the things I found was the idea of vulnerability. I can't talk. Vulnerability within a relationship um, was that it means to reveal your emotions and your weaknesses. So it's really just being open about how you're feeling and telling them what makes you upset, in a sense.
That's interesting. That is a way of being vulnerable within a relationship. But I really think just letting your guard down is the most vulnerable you can be with somebody. When you can start removing some of those walls that you put up, some of the masks that you put up between you and society with individuals, that's that's when you're being vulnerable, and that's when you can connect with somebody. But that's also when they can hurt you. And of course, caring about somebody is inviting pain to begin with, because when that person hurts, you will hurt as well. Not that that's bad. Pain is not bad, friends. From my perspective, you of course are allowed to have your own, but bearable pain is an experience just like pleasure. It's just geared in the other direction, and so it doesn't have to hurt so bad.
I think the point
That might just be me though.
I think the point you're trying to make is that not all pain is bad, because there is some pain that's bad, obviously.
Sure, of course.
Because I wrote down here that there's traumas, when you are trying to be vulnerable in a relationship, one of the hardest things I think to do is to reveal to that person the traumas that you've had in the past. To be like, hey, this is stuff that's happened to me. This is a weak point that I will have. I will get triggered. I have not quite healed from this because it's a trauma that somebody else did. And that often becomes a point of contention in relationships where like the other person doesn't want to hear it, or they start in with that whole like, yeah, but I'm not them. And it's they're bars to building that intimacy, and those things do hurt. And I wouldn't necessarily say that that is a good pain. That's a hurting pain. That's a bad pain. That's a something needs to be worked out pain.
Yeah, it's unfortunate when you're trying to establish boundaries, because that's what that really is. They're
Yeah.
saying, hey, this is something that's a trauma for me, and I'm sharing this with you because, I'm establishing what boundaries I have, and if the other person is unwilling, then it seems like maybe you've shared your vulnerability with the wrong person.
Right. Right. And there's a lot of ways that they could use that against you to be even worse and worse people to have been vulnerable to. Like doing guilt trips, using the things that you have given them to guilt you into doing things, putting you down for the things you've done. I've known people who have told their significant others about sexual acts that they did in a self exploration sort of way, that their partners decided that they were going to label their sexuality falsely and make fun of them for it. Again, with the gay thing. It's always, I don't know why it's so bad.
We just grew up in the 90s and the 80s. That was just the thing, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that were affected by that.
All of our
It'll
gay
pass
listeners,
eventually.
I'm so sorry. Like
That
it's
you've had to live through this.
yeah, there's no reason why it needed to be something that was, you know,
That we've had to
a
live through.
put down. Like, geez. It's not bad to be gay.
No.
It's bad to be homophobic though. Why don't we call that homo?
We don't need to reappropriate any terms. I think we're good on that.
That's fair. Well, anyway, it's all wrapped up in this concept of like you've been vulnerable in your romantic relationship, and then they're all like, well, you did this before, so obviously you're going to do it again in some meaningful way, and so I'm going to decide for you what that means and put
And
you down because of it.
that's isn't that the plot of Chasing Amy?
It is. It kind of
It
is,
is the
yeah.
plot of Chasing Amy.
Yeah. I was actually thinking about that when I wrote this stuff down.
That might have been spoilers for Chasing Amy, a movie from the 90s. Sorry about that if you haven't seen it. Anyway, that's interesting though. That is a very interesting. Mm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
It
mm-hmm.
doesn't always mean that person's being like they're not always an abuser, but I have seen it more commonly in people who are abusive to do these kinds of things. And those people aren't just abusive in their romantic relationships. It's just that's where all of the like big guns come out. People who are abusive tend to also be abusive in certain friendships and in certain areas of their workplace or their family.
I think that I think that the reason it comes out in romantic relationships is because that's where they themselves, like the abusers, have revealed their most vulnerabilities.
Mm.
Like they have, and this is I'm kind of generalizing here, so it's not across the board. There's certain to be exceptions, but they're afraid that their own vulnerabilities will be used against them, and so they do it in return, quote unquote, in return, even though it hasn't happened yet.
Or it's like a game.
Well, it's
Like
some
you
people.
meter out vulnerability and then see what the other person's capable of doing with it.
Sure, yeah. Some people just use that as like testing, like when you're getting into a relationship, you're like, okay, I'm going to give this little bit of vulnerability that if they're an asshole, I can handle that. And then I'll know that they're an asshole. But if they're not an asshole, then I'll have to move up to level 2, which I can probably handle that.
Right.
But level 3, I don't know. You know? Like, I think that that's what some people do. And I think that there's some, I'm going to say specifically dudes, because that's just the experience that I've had in my life, is a bunch of dudes whining about women that were, like, testing them and, like, why they got to play these games. Like, I heard that a lot when I actually paid attention to dudes that were
Yeah,
dating.
I've heard a lot of men
Excuse me.
talk about Talk about people like playing games with them, and when you actually talk to them, okay, what happened, what were they doing, what was this game that you're talking about? It's not them playing games, it's them being straight about their emotions, and these people just don't want to deal with them.
Kind of, yeah. Or they don't understand why you would just state your emotions.
Right.
Like, you know how just upfront I am with like people about how I'm feeling in the moment, though I
Mm-hmm.
don't necessarily react visually in the way that it makes sense. Most of them don't understand what I'm saying. They don't get it. Like, it doesn't make sense that someone would just announce their feelings like that.
I find it funny when people ask, how are you doing? Like, the more reciteful it sounds, is that a word?
Like wrote by like
Yeah,
recited.
like the more like habitual
Mm-hmm.
their question is, the more I feel like I almost have to be just blatantly honest about how I'm feeling in that moment.
Hey, how's it going?
Just to kind of
Oh.
like wake them up to like, you asked me this.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what the words you even said mean? And then they always kind of like, I don't know, they have this little like weird shake about them where they're like they're a real person again, like they were a brain dead robot for that interaction, and then I answer, and then they're like, oh hey, or they're angry at me,
Well, yeah.
which that's an aliveness too. So
Sure, sure, sure. Some people just react differently to being taken out of the fog.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, I've got, some other things like friends and work. Work, especially being vulnerable at work. I think a lot of people are afraid of being demoted or being made fun of in the context of like the group around them, maybe their team or their coworkers or whatever, and then feeling like they're just behind everybody else and being
Yes.
financially reprimanded for it.
Yes. I think, as someone has been in a corporate workplace for quite a while now, like, there's people are rationing their vulnerability very closely, very tightly, to the point where if people, do something wrong, then they will fight to the death to make sure that no one can prove that they did anything wrong.
Well, yeah, because if they did something wrong, then somebody else can come back with, well, you did it this time. So it's the same thing as, well, you did it before.
Yeah, kind of.
And then you're just labeled as the guy that does everything wrong.
Yeah, but unfortunately, that stuff is usually pretty obvious. Honestly, it really is pretty obvious, at least to some people. And so then you just get labeled as the person that refuses to take accountability.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that when you're a person that decides to just take accountability for stuff that isn't even your fault, then you're a fucking hero in a corporate workplace. Like, you never get punished. You get extra benefits and
I don't know about
extra
never,
responsibility.
because your experience isn't all
That's
experiences.
probably true. This is just the experience that I've had. But yeah, I feel like I'm fucking bragging now like an asshole, but that's okay. Um, anyway, so yeah, work relationships are interesting because it's usually a dance of vulnerabilities. Like, I want to share things that make you think I'm cool because I want to be cool
It's more game like.
a little bit. I hate it though. It feels like high school to me because that's kind of what high school and middle school felt like.
Well, I've been telling people like that's what our educational system like trains us to do, is basically to be toddlers in the workplace for the rest of our lives.
Yeah. So you kind of skipped Friends.
I didn't have anything to write down for friends, so I put it there in case you had anything to say.
I have so much to say about Friends. I don't know if it'll actually all come out because like
As a
it was a
friend, do you want a Skittles?
no. I don't want to skittle. No, thank you. I appreciate the offer. Um, I'm focused on Friends. Friends is such an interesting word, especially when it comes to human relationships, because so many people define it differently. Um, I'm not sure. Well, we've talked in the past, and like you have told me that your definition of friendship is like a pretty solid foundational. We're able to talk with each other like a deep thing,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
like that's what you kind of have to be called a friend by you. At least in the past, I'm not sure if you've softened on
Yeah,
that
most
slightly.
people's idea of friendships are my idea of an acquaintance.
Right, exactly. And like I don't even know if I subscribe to a personal philosophy for it because like I will kind of waffle on the term depending on the circumstances that I'm in or the people that I'm with. Because, like, some people, it's like we've been talking for 2.5 minutes and we smiled 4 times during this conversation, so we're definitely friends now. And other people are like, I haven't spent every moment of you for the last 60 days, every
No,
moment
no,
with you for the past 60 days.
that's not how I do it. It's
I know
more
it's not.
what did we talk about in that 2.5 minutes.
Wasn't even talking to you, but that's I understand.
Well, you are talking to me. I'm the only one here.
I'm not talking about you.
Oh, okay.
Silly. Anyway, um, and so like I kind of conform a little bit to who I'm around because I'm friendly, like in person and talking. I'm interested in what you have to say because you're human and I want to know what your experience is like. And if you're interested in my experience, I definitely want to share my experience with you. But like I'm not good at like being a friend outside of that, like remembering to like make plans and hang out. I suck at that shit all the time. And so friend is a weird concept for me, but it's a beautiful concept to me because it's, you know, when you take the whole pressure of sex off of a relationship, for a lot of people it becomes a friendship. And then it's anything you want it to be. And you have the opportunity to be incredibly vulnerable with friends in ways that some people are not able to be vulnerable with lovers. And
We've had a lot of experience with that, you and I.
yeah, actually. um, but
should I?
go ahead. Yeah,
So we used to, Mortal and I used to be in a relationship. We actually
a
used to be
romantic relationship.
engaged,
Mm-hmm.
believe it or not. And then things happened, and we realized not really up for this relationship to continue in a romantic sense. But we had built such a strong friendship foundation. We were like, there's no way that we're just going to fall out just because we can't make it work romantically doesn't mean that all the rest of this is bad.
Right, and there was an awkward transition period that I think a lot of people would have struggled to get through, but we both knew that we were cool with each other deep down. Like there was no problem. We were each other's favorite person.
Yeah.
And so like, friends friends matters in a way sometimes for some people in a way that lovers can't. And I've always kind of agreed in the past and to an extent with some people now that like your romantic partner, your life partner, the person that you share your finances and your kids with, that should be your best friend. Um,
I think so too.
I don't 100% know that it has to be anymore because so many different people have different edges and bumps on their puzzle piece. And so like people just fit differently together than what my experience would lead me to believe.
Well, I also have a weird, like, because of my weird definition of friendships, I don't quite understand best friendships. Because you're my best friend in some ways, and my partner's my best friend in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have other best friends in other ways. And so it's really hard for me to keep up because there's supposed to only be one.
That is that is a closed-minded idea. I'm sorry if you subscribe to that idea that the word best means only one, but unfortunately we're a lot more convoluted than that, and so we're going to have people that weigh more heavily in certain regards than others, and no one, in my belief, can satisfy all of your wants and needs. No one person can do that.
That's just way too much pressure to make them conform to every single need that you have socially.
There's a possibility, and I'm not gonna discount the possibility of soulmates that two people's wants and needs just fit each other so perfectly that they can satisfy that. It's a possibility, but honestly, have not seen a lot of it so far in life. And if you feel like you have that, that's fantastic. But I bet you have a friend or two, or a family member, an aunt,
Or a
or a
pet.
cousin, or a pet, exactly, that fits in a way that's special. That's all that really means. As a poly person, the reason why I'm poly is that I feel like we should be as open as we can be to other people that we meet in life that could fit those pieces in a way that we wouldn't allow if we were trying to, be completely loyal to one specific person.
Yeah, and I think from some people's perspective, excuse me, the relationship you and I have now
Mm.
could be considered an asexual, aromantic relationship.
Yeah. I mean, from a specific point of view, from the law's perspective, we're definitely domestic partners.
Yeah.
We do share finances and everything like that. So, like, you know, we're we're Jay and Silent Bob. You know what I mean? We're definitely platonic life mates at this
Hetero
point.
life partner.
Right. Well, I'm not super hetero, but
Yeah. Me neither,
yeah,
but
I know.
I pass for one.
Yeah, me too, sadly. Um, there's so many people at work that think that calling me gay is gonna offend me, and so like they say it and then like laugh like, "Oh, you're not gonna get mad, are you?" And it's like, if you only knew. I've tried to tell them to, and they just don't believe me, honestly. Anyway, sorry, that's just being silly.
So another thing I wanted to talk about is that when you're vulnerable to people and then they do those like guilt trips and put downs and blah blah blah, I want to stress that that says more about them than it does about you. Like them making fun of your vulnerabilities has nothing to do with those vulnerabilities. Does that
Very
make
little,
sense?
very little to do at least, probably, because you'll find that most of the things people say almost always say more about them than they do about you. Like, and that is specifically true when people are attacking, because usually people are attacking because they're afraid.
Yeah, and when I wrote that, I was thinking about the idea of like, okay, so let's say that I'm in a situation and I've been vulnerable and they've, made fun of me and now I feel bad. What am I supposed to do? And I was like, well, in that situation, my first thought would be, what is this saying about them? What did their response to my vulnerability mean about them?
Mm-hmm.
Not what does this mean about me? And I used to.
Mm-hmm.
I used to very much, and I still sometimes do. But when I'm on my A game, I think about what does this mean about the person that I'm with that they decided to make fun of me for this, and that tells me a lot about what I need to do next.
Mm-hmm.
I no longer feel the need to defend myself against them or try to get back in their good graces somehow
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
convince them that I'm a better person than they think I am because at that point I've assessed whatever it's said about them. It tends to come back to this idea of their opinion just doesn't matter to me anymore.
And it doesn't have to. That's the big thing, and people don't remember that sometimes. No one's opinion of you has to matter to you. It's nice when it does. There's people that care about you that would love for their opinion of you to matter, but like, but at the end of the day, you're with yourself, and so your opinion of yourself matters just so much more.
You remember not that long ago when I when I was on the journey of like how do I stop giving a shit without not giving a shit.
Vaguely. Mm-hmm.
That was how I put it. Now I have better words to describe it. It's more how do I stop caring what other people think about me in general without without no longer accepting that the people around me have things to say. Like I want to pay attention to the people I care about. And if like for instance if you say, "Hey, you're being kind of an asshole." I don't want to be like, "That doesn't matter. I don't care." But Joe Schmo on the street says I'm an asshole. I don't necessarily want to give that the same weight as I give your comment.
Sure.
Even if it's the same thing and about the same thing, I just there's certain people that you trust, and there's certain people that there's no reason to trust them right now.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And
Depending on your levels of energy, if you feel like you can take it, maybe take it a second and say, "Was I an asshole to Joe? Was I? No. Okay, then fuck that guy."
yeah, I'm coming from a place where I did that with everybody,
I
and
know,
so
and
I
so I did not
couldn't.
have the energy
Yeah,
for it.
that just didn't. I needed a way to like to set the boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody out there that's having that same problem, my experiential advice to you is practice self compassion. Know who you are and how you feel, and be able to accept those things without judging them. And when you can finally do that in the moments when somebody does, throw something at you and attack your vulnerabilities, in that moment, it no longer threatens you anymore. And it doesn't form your belief of who you are anymore. And I mean, I'm not a professional, so I can't say it helps in this way for everybody in every situation, but that is basically what I do now. That I haven't really worried so much about, oh, what do I do if somebody says something mean? Well, I remember who I am and how I feel. I investigate how I feel about what they said. I investigate whether I believe it to be true about myself. And then I ask, why are they saying this? What does this mean that they're saying this to
Mm-hmm.
me?
Absolutely. And you, regardless whether you're a professional or not, it's a good thing to keep in mind and maybe add to the way that you do stuff. If you'd like. I feel like I had more to say about Friends, but I don't have anything more to say about Friends. I might actually campaign for an episode about Friends in the future.
Mm.
No, not the show.
No, no, not the show. You mean like vulnerability with friends?
Yes, very much so.
I think that'll take a lot more research on my part because I can't even imagine. Like, I know that that's a good topic and everything, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head that we would talk about.
Interesting. Maybe that would just be a lot less structured of an episode, and I'll just like talk at you and see what your responses to me are.
Maybe. All I have left for this one is, Mortal's Journey, because I thought you might have some more things to say about relationships. You have a very special way of handling relationships.
Yeah, I haven't been as vulnerable in this episode because relationships are a little. I have an awkward relationship with relationships.
Well, you come at relationships, even with complete strangers, with more vulnerability.
Yeah, actually, I start more vulnerable than not. But it's about certain things and not about others. Like, I am very open about the experiences that I've had in life and my failures and mistakes and missteps that I've had in life. But when it comes to like positive things about me, then I become very awkward and shy. And so, like,
How does that differ from people you know?
is that not whatever?
You're pretty awkward and shy whenever I say something too.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm just awkward and shy with positive things, period, kind of. That's pretty
Although,
true.
although when I say something nice to you, you often like kind of snap back with like, "Nuh-uh, you're lying."
Yeah,
Which I don't think
sometimes.
you'd do that to a stranger.
Sometimes. It depends on the stranger. Also, I may have started mumbling. I'm sorry, I'm talking about myself, and so it might be mumbly. Good luck. Um, See, when I started looking at interacting with people socially, um, there's a lot of ways that it came very easily to me, even as a kid. People just kind of liked having me around. I never really felt like I had much of a say in what was going on, and I just sort of like went with the flow and was moderately positive to the people around me. This is just my memory. I could be off. Ask my parents, but they don't remember either. Trust me. Um, and then I had middle school where everybody's mean to everybody, and it like just destroyed my mentality, and I became the lowest version of myself. And then we moved, and I had an opportunity to become a different person, and so people pleasing became a huge part of my identity to the point where I denied myself. And so relationships really just came about because people were interested in hanging out around me. And as I evolved into my 20s, it was that I started becoming interested in people. I started becoming a lot more aware of of my crushes, basically, is what I called them. I certainly had them in like high school and stuff, but like it became more interesting, honestly, after the first time that you and I dated when we were teens. Um, and that finding interesting people and figuring out how they ticked, how they thought, what their experience was like, became like everything to me, and it didn't matter what I wanted or needed. And so it's very difficult for me to talk about the vulnerability of relationships because I've avoided it. I avoided it for a very long time, and I try now with the friendships that I'm making because I'm pretty asexual at this moment, and I've been aromantic I think most of my life. um, So with the friendships that I'm making now, I'm trying to be more vulnerable, but it's just very awkward because I don't know how to weave that stuff into conversation. Most people are very comfortable, especially in the beginning parts of a relationship, talking about their own experiences. And maybe there's a waiting for the other person to chime in, for me to chime in with my own experiences. But I it just doesn't, I don't know how to throw it all in there. And so, like, I feel like I'm being fake all the time.
Well, the thing with you that I've noticed is that you seem to be a lot more comfortable with taking the blame and putting yourself down because it's disarming. If you tell them all of the terrible things about yourself, then there's no surprises when they happen if they are that bad. And if they're not that bad, then they'll be able to tell you, oh, it's not really that bad. So you've disarmed them with, the harsh truth. But when it comes to positive things or even neutral things that, may seem like, I don't think you even think that the neutral things even matter. Like, you like zombie stuff. Like, that's neutral. That's not really a positive necessarily. It's not a negative. It could be a positive or a negative for certain people, but in general, it's
It's
pretty.
whatever.
Yeah, it's whatever. It's just something that you like.
It's pretty mid.
But for you, it's not even important to. Why would you even discuss it? Because it takes away from the other person. And you've learned, and this is no. This is no, like, it's not saying anything bad about people, but people in general, they want to talk about themselves.
It seems from my experience. I don't blame anybody for that either. It's
And
totally
maybe we're
fine.
getting into the age group that, like, people don't necessarily want to talk about themselves all the time.
Maybe.
But for, like, teenage years and early 20s, it's pretty common for people to just want to talk about themselves. They don't necessarily want to talk about other people unless those things come back to themselves.
Right. I think there's a huge search and yearning journey for validation when you're young, when you're becoming a young adult. And it's hard to remember that other people exist sometimes
Yeah.
during that process, at least from my experience. What's the other stuff you said? You said some other stuff I was going to respond to.
That it's disarming for you to say the negative things.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. In a way, yeah, I have found that it is pretty disarming for me to say the negative things. But what I was really kind of like poking into is that I'm trying to do that now, like in Twitch and stuff, and in Discord and whatever. Like someone brings up something that I have some sort of experience with, I'm like, oh yeah, hey, me too, or whatever. And this was my experience, and write a sentence or two. I try to keep it short because most people don't want to read walls of text. I don't know why. I like walls of text myself; they're fun. But
Well,
um,
I think if you asked Ciaran, there are certain places where that's not necessarily true.
Well, yeah, and there's a few people on Medium that have now experienced my wall of text comments, and we'll see if that continues. Time is what it is. Time isn't real. Anyway, so so I'm really actually trying to like put some of that stuff out there, and like literally every time I do, there's that fucking asshole in my head, the voice in my head telling me that I'm being selfish and arrogant and narcissistic, and why would anybody give a shit that
Yeah,
this was the experience. And then like
that monster is always
in
there,
a
isn't it?
in a goddamn like in a Twitch chat, when I say something like I'm like, oh hey, I had this experience with this thing you're talking about, and then fucking silence from chat for like a minute, like I'm mortified. I feel like I just ruined the room. Like I just walked into a room and like shat on the table at a fine dining fancy place, and everybody had to walk out of the room. Like I genuinely feel like that, and I've worked now really hard to get to the point where I can suppress, or at least only feel that within myself and not react outwards towards people in that regard.
Fine dining fancy place.
Shut up. You knew exactly what I was talking about.
I know, but
You
the
saw the
words.
tablecloths I was talking about.
I
I'm
know, but the
sure of it.
words, they gave me the giggles.
They're good. That's good. I like giving giggles and smiles. So I don't know if that answers the question. I feel like we've been kind of like bebopping, dancing around the real meat of what this episode could have been. But
This,
I have a feeling I'm just being hard on myself today.
relationships was such a broad topic. Like, there was just so much. And I know I didn't write down a whole lot in my notes, but that was specifically so that I didn't accidentally, like, box us into a specific flow. I wanted
Right.
us to be able to bebop around and
Yeah,
do the
right on.
things that we do.
That's cool.
Give it more freedom again. It's a different kind of episode when we do that.
Right. Maybe our sequel episodes for these will be a little bit more of a specific deep dive into
I think
aspects.
some will like that if we do that biochemistry of anxiety episode.
That's a very specific deep
That's a
dive.
very specific deep dive. We're not going to be able to bebop around nearly as much.
I might try
Oh, we're obviously going to try. Like, come on.
though.
We can't just sit still. That's not us. But I mean, I think we did pretty okay. What do you think, listener? Let us know. Did we do okay with an introduction to relationships and vulnerability?
Yeah, let us know in the comments below. Um, and full disclosure, both Tam and I were, we're a little run down today. So, and
Yeah, my partner's sick with a fever and everything, and I might be coming down with it. So,
right, like we both forgot to like mute our phones before. There was a moment where you were talking and we were both trying really hard to mute our phones silently.
yeah,
It's been a it's been a bit shit show of an episode maybe, but like I think it was still fun. And when we listen back to it, hopefully we don't cringe too much.
that's always the goal, right? Just to not cringe too much.
Not cringe too much.
A little bit's okay.
Embrace the cringe, but not too hard.
All right. So next episode, I hadn't really decided what we wanted to do.
Oh.
So we could circle back to you good's suggestion, to your compliments thing, or we could go straight into the new person giving us a suggestion. Excuse me. It feels a little bit like cheating because Eric Monk just started listening and just gave the suggestion. But at the same time, I kind of like the voluntary and involuntary concept. But I don't know. I'm going to leave it up to Mortal.
Yeah, please bear with me while I contemplate and say some words that take up airtime.
Well, I can take up a little bit of time if you need some time.
What do you think? What do you think? How would you summarize you good's suggestion? Like the vulnerability of like online relationships?
Yeah, I'd have to go back through and find the comment, but it was basically like the fear that people on Medium specifically have behind, like if you meet somebody else on Medium and then both of you have pen names or one of you has a pen name, there's this fear of like who is the person behind the pen name?
Mm.
Are they friendly? Are they, well, in their case, are they potentially somebody that I know pretending to be somebody else?
Sure, yeah, and that's definitely a concern. And maybe
It kind of goes back to like those early 2000 days of like who you meet on a chat room. They say they're, 24-year-old female, but they're really a 58-year-old man, you know?
sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then, the whole like sharing personal data and pictures, like how vulnerable you have to be to extend that trust, and like at what point do you extend that trust?
Interesting. That's an interesting idea for an episode. I think I would broaden myself. I don't know that you agree with me, and that's fine if you don't. But I think myself, I would broaden that to kind of online interaction vulnerability, which is I think pretty applicable to what we're doing. So I think maybe I'm okay with doing that one. I'm gonna broaden it from just Medium to also Discord and Twitch though,
What?
because that's the thing that I'm doing.
I don't know if this is correct or not, but I think part of it might have been her suggestion might have been her and my interaction, because we have actually gotten pretty personal in our emails and everything. And there might have been some undertone in that of like how that felt for us to go through that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And, keeping with the theme of us being the ones being vulnerable, us sharing our personal experiences in regards to that would be good. So you could share your experience, you know, consensually,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and I can share mine. Are you cool with that?
Yeah, we'll
Because
call
like
that internet.
I like Eric Monk's idea too, but
It felt a little bit like cheating. I'm sorry, Eric Monk, but you
you're on
just
the
gave
list.
it. You're
You're on
on
the
the
list.
list, but yeah. So we'll call it internet vulnerability,
Love it.
and I'm writing. I'll talk about my story. I won't dox anybody, just in case you goods listening. That will not be. It'll just I'm all about keeping things private that need to be private.
I'm gonna dox so many people. I'm just joking. I would never. I would
No, no,
never.
dox, not doc.
Dox. Doc? I don't know
Like
what that means.
docking.
Oh.
I was making a joke.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get you. I get you.
Mm-hmm.
I would.
I know, that's why the joke was funny. It wouldn't be funny if it was something you wouldn't do.
I know.
Anyway, I guess that's it for this episode then.
Okay, well, thank you so much again for hanging out with us. I hope our scuffed episode was entertaining and fun for y'all. I'm eternally mortal, and I hope you find smiles this day.
And I am the accidental monster on Medium. We're both on Medium. And until next time, follow each other, follow the dopamine, and follow yourselves always.